Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of CMPAC Spotlight. And tonight we have yet another great producer and another great show to highlight. In the studio with me is Mr. Fernando Cardenas. And I don't think I pronounced that correctly. It's Cardenas.
Cardenas. Sounds good. Sounds good. Very good.
All right. Of El Cristiano.
That's right.
All righty.
So, the Christian.
Yes, El Christian. Well, I am so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Because I have seen the show, and you are behind the scenes.
Right.
But you do a lot. That means a lot.
Right.
Because it's all about, being able to bring something that is awesome and that's going to be interesting and going to be educational and uplifting to our audience.
Right.
So tell us about El Cristiano.
Well, interesting part about it is it takes me back about 28 years. My wife and I were married by a pastor, and his name, I forgot his name. I apologize, but
no problem.
He produced a show here on cable access.
Okay.
And many years ago, 28 years ago.
Wow.
And I came in to help him with the camera. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he had suggested is that I would help him produce the show. At the time, I had no idea what it took to produce a show. Mm-hmm. And so I came and I helped and I saw how they did some of the things. And my wife and I went to another church and we were there. It's one of the big churches here in Charlotte, Calvary Church.
Calvary Church.
And so there was a Spanish ministry started, and Pastor William Ortega, William Ortega is the pastor that married my wife and I, and we started 28 years ago.
Nice.
William Prado is the one that did the Spanish service at Calvary. And so I had mentioned to him briefly, I said, I could put a show together.
Right.
And he said, yeah, if you can do that, that's fine. The interesting thing is I didn't have a computer.
Okay.
I didn't have a camera.
Wow.
And but I knew what it would take to do, and the Lord provided. The church had a camera that I was able to use on Sundays, and had a laptop that was donated to me.
Wow.
And I was able to edit it. In fact, that same laptop is about 14 years old, and I'm still using it to edit today. So.
It never amazes me, never ceases to amaze me how everything that you need at the right time that you need it for what you need to do will be in place.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, again, you're behind the scenes, but bringing this program to the platform is important.
Yes. One of the things that helped me was just the technology that is in cable access.
Yeah.
And the wisdom of the men and women that work here. Because, like I said, for 28 years, been here, my show has been on for 16 years. But I've seen a lot of changes. They used to use the large tapes, the cartridges, and they used to do the editing in the platform. And from there, they went to the Macintosh with the pro editing. And they started asking that the producers use tape, the smaller tapes.
Yeah.
We did that.
Right.
I used to have 100 tape cassettes to do that. And then from there, it went to CDs, and then DVDs, I'm sorry.
No problem.
And then from the DVDs, now to storage and uploading with the technology now because of COVID. And
right, that's right. And I am so glad to hear that you were able to transition from one format to the next, because it is important to be able to use whatever is in your hands, whatever is at your fingertips, in order for you to get done what you need to get done.
Correct.
And when we talk about the Spanish community, a lot of times there has been a language barrier. And here I scrubbed up your name. We were talking about this off camera, that I speak more French than Spanish, and I don't want to mess up the Spanish. But a lot of times, because that's been a barrier, we need to know, we need to learn more. So how do you help maybe even through the ministry, engage the community in learning more about the Latino community?
Well, what's interesting is French and Spanish are love languages. They're and they kind of are derived from kind of the same place.
Right.
What's interesting about the French and the Spanish language that a lot of people don't realize is that there is gender assigned to certain things.
Right.
And people don't understand quite what that is until you speak the language. Like, for example, a door is la puerta, the door.
Yeah.
You know, a window is la ventana, so it's female. And so depending on what you're speaking about, it gives the gender identity. And one of the things that has been really interesting and powerful that I've seen is that the language, like you said, the barrier is starting to be less and less.
Right.
One of the things that I was really grateful when we started doing the program in 2006 at Calvary is that Pastor Prado, William Prado, he would put it in English and be translated to Spanish. Now, the advantage to that is twofold. One is people that know one language can listen to another language at the same time and understand what they're speaking about.
Right.
Not only that, if you have a culture where you have a husband and wife that are from different cultures that don't speak English or Spanish, they can sit together in the same service and listen to the same message.
That is so wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And I think we as Americans here, we need to know more languages. And so I think that's an awesome tool that you just gave. Now, when it comes to some of the things that we know we're dealing with in our community, how does the church address some of those? Or maybe you can give us some examples of some of the concerns and circumstances that we find in the community that we need to address.
Well, one of the things that's really interesting is that my program is called El Cristiano, the Christian. So it kind of narrows down what we are emphasizing. And one of the things that I've done is that the churches that I've assisted in getting the programs in place are the ones that are Bible-believing churches. What I mean by that is they take the Word of God and they preach it. In fact, the pastors sometimes are line by line. And what happens is the Bible was written in a format that took over 1,400 years to write by over 40 different authors. But even with all that, it is, there are no errors in the way it is put. And if you were to have a modern day 2 or 3 people just writing one thing, it would be very controversial, very different.
Right.
And so if we look, humanity and a lot of things that affect them have gone on through all those years. And it's still going on today. And so what happens is, in fact, 3 of the programs that I brought in just to speak about, one is talking about the family and how the family of Christ, and you have that relationship where Christ wants, his goal is that we love one another.
Yes.
And so as a family, that's one of the programs that I have. Another one is having to do as learning as what Christ would want you to learn. So Christ said, follow me. He didn't say follow that religion, follow that pastor. And so what happens is a lot of times we follow leaders or people that are going to fail. They're human.
Right.
And so if we look at it through that viewpoint, and then lastly, the other pastor was talking about Pastor Prado, and the program that I put for him was him coming from Brazil.
Yeah.
And at the time that he was in Brazil, he was in a situation where he was not, how do I put it? He was more of the world than anything else.
Okay.
And so there was a family that decided to go look for him. And he was talking about that in the city where he's in,
Yeah.
at the time, there was 5 million people. Today, there's 22 million people. So how are you going to find somebody in a situation like that?
Yeah.
But they ended up going, and they found him, and they rescued him. They cleaned him up. They put a ring on his finger, as he said, and kind of helped him get along. And now he's been a pastor for many years.
Okay. So, all right. So this gentleman you're saying his family was looking for him.
Well, this was another family. It's kind of like a Christian family.
Okay.
His father was a pastor, and his family was very religious, but he went off and grew up.
Just grew up.
He has 3 sisters.
Okay.
And his mother, so he always felt like he had 4 mothers.
Oh, wow.
And so he kind of, as growing up, rebellious and stuff. And so this other couple came and helped him bring him back,
Okay.
as he says.
I see. And so basically all of this is an example of the family coming together and really loving each other like we should do across cultures.
Right.
And in our family and outside of. So that's an awesome story. Yeah. And, I think about my neighbors. I have neighbors who are Spanish speaking from Honduras. And then I know that there are Mexican Americans here.
Right.
You mentioned Brazil. And so tell us about what you see in this area, Charlotte, North Carolina, this area in terms of the population from which part of the world that's in our community. In the Spanish-speaking community.
One of the interesting things that happened was that Impacto is now at Carmel.
The Carmel, you need that? Yeah. Carmel Church, Carmel Baptist Church?
Yeah, Carmel Baptist Church. And the service is at 1. But this was started about 5 years ago in January. And the pastors were, wanting to see about getting, like you said, the Hispanic community. So a brother in Christ, Pastor Ortega, the one that does the church plantings, he's the one that married my wife and I 28 years ago. And I wrote a proposal. And in the proposal, we actually showed demographics. And one of the things that I had mentioned to you is the 3 most popular languages in the world. And the 3 are?
Chinese, Spanish, and English.
And in that order.
You told me that.
Yes.
You told me that order.
And so we showed graphs of the United States, the world basically, where they speak Spanish. And if you look at a map where they speak Spanish, it's mostly South America, Mexico, and the U.S., if you consider it. And for the rest of the world, if you look at the globe as a whole, Spain, and then another country in Africa. So if you think about it, the most populous Hispanic community is in the new Americas.
Right.
In the Americas.
Yeah.
And so we then narrowed it down to North Carolina.
Okay.
And showed the population. We used the population. We just had a census not too long ago.
Right.
But we didn't have that at the time. We used the one for 2010.
Yeah.
And the growth. And we also showed the growth that was in Mecklenburg County. And we showed the growth that was in the city of Charlotte. And it continues to grow.
Continues to grow.
Yes, continues to grow.
Yeah.
And you would be surprised because trying to isolate where the Hispanics are is very difficult.
Right. There's that wonderful spread. And, we do have a lot of news stories that are focusing on our Latin population and the immigration. And I tell you, the history of the United States, however, was all about expanding, and it expanded into Spanish territory, Mexican territory, indigenous people territory. And it was that way, the conflict then, and there's conflict now. And I love what you're saying and what we're talking about here about loving on each other and understanding that it's about humanity. And so with the language barrier, that's been some of the issue. How would you encourage the English-speaking community to engage with the Spanish-speaking community?
For the most part, the Hispanic community and a lot of people that are not Hispanics don't realize, but Hispanics, they have a range as broad as everybody else. So if you see somebody that is completely white and you speak to them and they're Hispanic, or you'll see somebody that's completely black. In other words, we have that whole range.
Right.
And the whole range of religious beliefs and areas. And one of the things that happens is each of these countries, you were mentioning how many different countries. Just in like Calvary, I forget how many countries there were. I represented flags from different nations in Spanish. And in Impacto, we've got about 50 members at this time. But even there's at least 14 or 15 different countries represented. And so the difference is, even though they're all Hispanic, each culture is very unique. And so each country has their own unique flavors and cooking, and kind of think of it like the U.S. If you think of New York, and you think of New Orleans, and you think of some of these other places.
Yes, sir.
It happens the same way.
I hear you. And speaking of food, one thing is popping into my head. One of our crew members is from Michigan, and she talks about these cookies that are specifically made in Michigan that you pretty much can't find anywhere else. And so it's unique to the area. And what you're talking about when it comes to the different food, one of the things I think we can do with engaging one another is go to some of the festivals. You know, and I know there's more than Cinco de Mayo.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of them. In fact, each different country, if you'll look on the sets nowadays, they'll have a festival for a lot of these different countries. They'll have one for Puerto Rico. They'll have one for Brazil. They'll have one for, Colombia. They'll have one for Dominican Republic. And even though they're for the different countries, all the different countries still go to enjoy that culture.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And sounds like over at Impacto, there's opportunities as well. And, now, like you said earlier, the barrier is becoming less and less. And one thing I have seen are the children. The children who may be first generation, in the country, and they will interpret for their parents. And they are in school and able to really, kind of do the cross-cultural thing. So I think our next generation. So what would you say about the youth? What is Impacto doing with the youth?
Well, they teach even really small children Sunday school. And basically it's the same Sunday school as any other Sunday school. The only difference is, of course, the language. But one of the things that happens is when you're able to develop, like, for example, when I was little, I grew up learning English and Spanish because my grandmother did not want me to mix the languages. So she wanted me to speak Spanish correctly and English correctly. And I would go with her to the doctor at 5 years old and translate, and the doctors would be amazed that this young child was doing that. And I think you'll see that more and more as children are doing that more for their parents.
Absolutely. In fact, I was at a festival back in April, and it was like the kickoff to the summer festivals and the summer fun.
Right.
And this one family, I wanted everybody. And I really wanted to talk to the teenagers, but it was the little 8-year-old who was talking to me, and she was translating for Papi. And, you know, everyone was there. They knew what I was doing because I had a camera.
Right.
But she was talking to me, and I was like, you know, trying to speak a little Spanish and not mix the words up with French. And so she understood and I understood, and it was a fun time, and it was a learning experience.
And the reason children learn so quickly is they don't have to worry about the bills. They don't have to worry about saying something incorrectly. They don't have to worry about embarrassing themselves.
Right.
So they just say it and they do it and it comes out.
You know, you just gave me an idea, because I do get embarrassed many times because I really don't want to be offensive by messing someone's language up. And so with the kids, however, I think they would be more forgiving, you know.
Well,
and
adults would too, because
Okay.
if you think about it, if you're trying to learn somebody's language or somebody's culture, they would see it as, you know, if you're taking the time to do that, it's because you admire it.
That's right.
And so we would be honored that you would do that.
Well, I am so glad, because I mean, I do have, like I was mentioning earlier, my neighbors, and because we know each other and they help me. And then I think years ago, I remember I was volunteering at community television, public access here.
Right.
And Jorge, his mom, he was a teenager who was here, and his mom was teaching me Spanish.
Right.
So you mentioned La Puerta. That's one of the things she was teaching me. Okay, Dawn, La Puerta, that's the door.
Exactly.
And, you know, we were able to do that for a while. And things, you know, have changed when it comes to learning about the variety of, it's still Spanish, but the variety of cultures that speak the Spanish language.
Right.
You know, it's a lot to learn, and it's exciting.
Right.
Yeah. And then to put it in the context of, you know, learning about bringing your ministry to this platform. Yeah. So explain to us, getting back to that, explain to us what your process is, how you actually put the show together, and what you prefer to do in terms of how you put it together.
Well, one of the things that I've learned, like I mentioned, the Bible was written over, 1,400 years with over 40 writers.
Yeah.
And when you start reading, some of those people, when you read a book, you tend to see how the person expresses themselves, the words they use, their thoughts, their processes. Well, the same thing with when I film somebody. Each pastor, when they give the gospel, they're going to give it in their way. And the Lord's going to inspire them by using the Bible, His Word, and, the Holy Spirit, the communication, and whatever's in his heart to be able to do that. And each person's going to do it in a different way. Some people will do it really quickly. Some people will do it really slowly but methodically. Some people will analyze it in a different way. So it's beautiful to see, and you're going to learn, but it's going to be interesting how you learn and how they teach you. So what I like to do is I basically set up the camera, and some of the guys help me set up. In fact, they set up the lights, and I'll set up the camera, and we'll get a distance set up every Sunday. I've got a cord that I've got taped off as to where the pastor is and where the camera is, and we're set precisely where we're at. We'll go ahead and film it. What I do is I let the pastor know, I need 30 minutes. I said, you can go 5 hours or whatever. I'm going to cut it down to 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
And one of the things I learned at cable access many years ago is you want to end when the pastor ends, when that prayer ends. You don't want to start, some people like to start at the very beginning. I'd rather end exactly at that time, because when you do a conversation, people catch on, oh, they're talking about this, and then you'll get there.
Yeah.
And then when you end, all all the pastors end with a prayer, so that's where I know where to end it. And so I'll take 30 minutes. What I'll do is I'll start, I'll look at the time. They don't have to worry about the time.
Right.
I'll just give them a thumbs up when it's 30 minutes. If they go over, I'm fine with that. Then I'll cut back and I'll take those 30 minutes. One of the things I learned at Access throughout all those years was have my intro and my ending. Have it in there and then just drop the program, the 30 minutes in the...
Right.
And so, like you said, because their cards, the SIM cards will last you about 12 and a half minutes, I guess. So you'll have pieces that you'll have to put together. But for the most part, I'll edit it. Once I edit it, I'll copy it to a friend of mine, a brother in Christ. He'll put it on YouTube. Then our pastor will put it on Facebook for Impacto.
Very good.
And so I don't do Facebook and all that stuff. I'm more old school.
Gotcha.
But that's what we like to do.
Well, that's all right, because just the fact that you are involved and you're engaged in the process, and then there's other people who have the capability of putting it on the social media part.
Correct.
And that's the team.
Correct.
Yeah. And what you described about the beginning and the end and putting something in the middle, that took me back to my days in news where we called it a donut. Okay. Because, it wraps around that center that you plop in there.
Correct.
And so, this is good information. People out there, would like to probably, do some things you're doing, specifically our Latino and our Hispanic youth.
Correct.
So how about you tell everyone when they can see El Cristiano?
Well, it's on Thursday nights at 9:30. I had the opportunity to choose different time periods. And I thought, well, Sunday, don't want to do that because I'd rather people go to church and go to their church. Saturdays, I want them to spend it with their family. Wednesdays, they may go to church to do some training or studying. Friday, they may have choir practice or something. And so I figured Thursday would be a good night for the family to be in. It's 9 o'clock, so it should be time for the kids to be going to sleep. And the parents can sit and enjoy.
Awesome. Well, you got it all, programmed out, and that's really good. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, and thank you for being here with us.
I appreciate it.
All right, and we'll look back and see everything that you're doing, kind of as we transition to even new technology, newer.
Correct.
So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All righty. All right, you guys, thank you for joining us for this episode of CMPAC Spotlight. Check us out on tvaccess21.com and check out all of the videos on demand. You'll see some of El Cristiano's postings there while they last, so check it out. And we'll see you next time right here on CMPAC Spotlight.